Welcome to English Podcast for Listening and Speaking. This channel will help you improve your English skills. Now, let's get started.
Welcome to a deep dive. We take the material you send us, and this time, it's a really fascinating transcript looking at the relationship between two, incredibly public figures. And our job here is to dig into it, trace how this connection went from maybe an unexpected start to a very, very public fight.
Yeah, and see what this source material really tells us about power, personality, maybe how things play out at that very high level.
So the material kicks off with something pretty striking, doesn't it? This idea of an initial friendship.
It really does. It describes President Trump and Elon Musk as initially good friends, working closely, which, thinking about it, leader of a country, major tech figure, it's an interesting pairing to begin with.
Definitely. The source says it goes from that apparently strong connection.
Right, to this sudden, very public argument that, surprised a lot of people, according to the transcript.
Okay, so let's get into that early phase the transcript describes. President Trump and Elon Musk, good friends, close collaboration.
That's how the source lays it out. It actually details Musk having a role, a specific role, inside the government during Trump's first term.
Oh, really? What kind of role?
He had this special job to find ways to save government money. That's the quote from the material.
Wow, okay. Finding ways to save government money. And did this effort have a name?
It did, according to the source, the Department of Government Efficiency. But it also mentions this nickname, DOGE.
DOGE. Okay. That's certainly a memorable nickname.
It is, and the transcript stresses this wasn't just, shuffling papers. Musk's work apparently led to real changes.
Like what?
Well, it says he helped close down certain parts of the government, and that jobs were lost as a result. The source calls it a big story at the time.
So real-world impact and their interactions. The source mentions those too.
Oh, yeah. Talks about them meeting in pretty significant places. The Oval Office, the Cabinet Room.
Right.
It even says they sometimes travel together,
Yeah.
Mentioning the president's plane. So that suggests, a certain level of access and closeness.
Definitely. And how long did this specific job last?
The source puts it at more than 100 days, somewhere around 130 days, it says.
And the end of that period, how did that go down, according to the transcript?
Apparently quite well. It describes a friendly meeting in the Oval Office when his job finished. The feelings seem to be that they might even work together again in the future.
So this whole initial period, the source frames it as pretty solid, right? Cooperation, friendship.
Exactly. And it notes that Trump himself later described his time by saying they had a great relationship, using the past tense, notably.
Yeah, that past tense is telling. So that's the baseline the source establishes. A strong connection.
A strong connection, which makes the next part of this story, as laid out in the material, even more dramatic. It describes things changing really quite fast.
Okay, so what was the trigger? What does the source say happened to, change that dynamic?
The transcript points to one specific thing. A new government spending plan. A big one.
A major policy initiative. And Musk's reaction.
According to the source, he looked at the plan, and, he really didn't like it. He thought the government just shouldn't be spending money that way.
Okay, so he disagreed with the policy.
Fundamentally.
Yeah.
The source says it became a problem for him.
And here's where it gets interesting, right? The source emphasizes how he expressed this disagreement.
Exactly. He didn't just, have a quiet word. The material says he decided to speak about his ideas in public.
He went public against the plan.
Yeah, for over a week, it says. Actively speaking out against it.
And the source really flags this as significant.
It does. It calls this public opposition the first time there was a really big, visible problem between them.
So how did Trump react to this public criticism, according to the transcript?
Well, it says he heard what Musk was saying, and he didn't like it. Plain and simple. The source uses the phrase, not happy.
Understandable, I suppose. A public split on a major issue.
Yeah, their ideas were just different on something really important. And the public started noticing this shift. The source says people saw Musk, who they remembered as being close to Trump, now speaking out against his plan. And it was surprising for many people.
Right.
The material is pretty clear. The good relationship was just not the same after that. This was the beginning of the public breakdown.
So that public disagreement over the spending plan was the start. But the source says it didn't stop there, did it? It escalated.
Oh, yeah, it got much bigger, according to the transcript. It turned into what the source calls a very public fight.
Right.
Everyone could see it.
A really big shift from before.
Totally different. And Trump started talking about it openly, too. The source says he expressed sadness, but also that he was, again, not happy with Musk.
Did he use strong language?
Very strong, according to the material. It says he described Musk as acting strangely, even like he went crazy.
Wow.
And he also apparently said Musk had to leave his job. Though the source points out this was after Musk's role had already finished.
Interesting timing.
Yeah, but the main message from Trump, as reported in the source, was clear. Very disappointing.
That's quite a turnaround from giving him that efficiency job.
It really is. And Musk, he was also very public about it, according to the source.
How did he respond?
He used social media a lot, the transcript says. Specifically X, writing many posts about the whole thing.
So taking the fight online.
Definitely. The source even mentions him sharing funny pictures or memes related to it. And apparently he felt his posts were actually helping drive people to use X more.
So leaning into the public nature of it. And the news spread quickly.
Everywhere, the source says. Newspapers, TV, online, it was impossible to miss. The disagreement was not quiet anymore, it was loud and public.
Oh, it's pretty unusual, isn't it? Two figures that powerful arguing so openly.
Extremely unusual. The source notes the words got stronger and stronger. It even uses a comparison like a war, but only with words.
War of words.
Yeah. And the takeaway from the source is that this public battle made it crystal clear whatever alliance they had before, it was over.
Okay, so the public fight is raging, but then the source says it moved beyond just words. It got into big threats.
Yeah, this is where, according to the material, things got potentially much more serious. Real stakes involved.
What kind of threats are we talking about? Let's start with Musk.
The source describes Musk talking about possibly stopping a really important space program, one run by his company, SpaceX.
Which one?
It mentions a special spacecraft that's used to get U.S. astronauts to space. Apparently, Musk thought about stopping this program completely.
Whoa, that's not a small thing.
Not at all. The source calls it a very big idea with potentially very big effects on space travel for the country. A major threat, basically.
Okay, so a threat with huge national security and scientific implications. What about Trump's threat, according to the source?
The transcript says Trump suggested the government might stop working with Mr. Musk's companies.
Which companies?
It specifically names SpaceX again for space travel and Tesla, the electric car company. Both have government contracts, the source notes.
So hitting back through government business.
Exactly. And the source explains this could be a very big problem for Mr. Musk and his businesses, hitting him where it hurts, financially.
The source really emphasizes how serious this phase was, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It says these threats made the situation much, much worse, raising the tension very high, almost to a breaking point. These weren't just insults. They had real possible consequences.
It's fascinating because it's like they were leveraging their different kinds of power against each other.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Government power versus, control over critical technology and huge market value. And the public was watching this unfold.
Closely, the source says, because seeing people this powerful fight like this, with these kinds of threats out in the open, is very unusual.
It marked a new and dangerous step, according to the transcript.
So the threats weren't just talk anymore.
No, the source frames it as being about potential actions with very big and negative effects. And it mentions people in government and business getting worried about the fallout, raising some big and important questions about how all this works.
Right, this interplay between government and massive private companies. So, okay, we have the threats. Did the source describe any actual tangible effects from this public fight, especially on Musk's side?
It does. It points directly to Tesla, his electric car company, which, as the source notes, is a huge company with shares traded on the stock market.
And what happened?
The transcript is very specific here. It says the price of Tesla shares went down.
By how much?
It gives a number.
Yeah.
They fell by 14%.
14%. That's significant for a company that size. What did that mean in terms of overall value?
The source states the company's total value fell below $1 trillion. It had been more than $1 trillion before this.
Wow. So the source connects the public fight directly to a major financial hit for Musk.
Yeah, it underlines that this was not just words. The conflict had a direct and negative result on Musk's business empire, hitting the value of his biggest, most visible company. Investors were clearly paying attention.
Interesting. What about the other threat, the SpaceX spacecraft? Did anything happen there?
Well, the source revisits that issue. It says that even though Musk had floated the idea of stopping the use of that crucial spacecraft,
Yeah.
he changed his mind. He publicly announced he would not stop using it,
Right.
basically walking back that earlier threat.
Ah, okay. So he pulled back on that one. How does the source interpret that decision?
It frames it as obviously important for the government space program, but it also suggests something broader, that maybe some business activities, especially those tied to government needs, are just too critical to be stopped because of a personal or political fight.
Like some things are too important to become political footballs, even between powerful people.
That seems to be the implication the source draws, which then leads into these bigger questions it raises.
Right. Like how should these powerful relationships between business leaders and government work? What happens when they break down so publicly?
Yeah, and would the government actually pull contracts? Would this fight make things harder for Tesla long term?
Yeah.
Lots of uncertainty generated by the conflict.
So beyond the threats and the business impact, the source also talks about where this fight was happening, doesn't it? The arena shifted.
It did. It specifically says the fight moved to the internet using the social media site X.
And Musk was particularly active there.
Very active, according to the source, using X often, writing many posts about the disagreement, all out there for everyone to see.
Just constantly putting it out there.
Yeah, it says he wrote about the situation several times, which just kept making the fight even more public.
Did this source highlight any specific types of posts he made?
It mentions one interesting angle.
Yeah.
In some posts, Musk apparently wrote about time, about longevity.
How so?
He supposedly compared how long he expected to be around and active, like maybe 40 years or more,
Yeah.
versus how much time Trump had left in his presidential term, which was just a few years.
Huh. That's quite a statement.
The source calls it a strong thing to say online, kind of implying, that Musk felt his influence would outlast Trump's time in office. A bit of a power play, maybe.
Seems like it. And again, the source stresses this was all public.
Totally public. Not private talks, it says, but out there for the whole world to read, which naturally brought much more attention to the whole thing.
So the online aspect just amplified everything.
Massively. The source says it made the disagreement seem bigger in the eyes of the public, showed it was ongoing, not finished. X became like a main place to follow the drama.
The source uses a phrase like watching the disagreement happen live in small tag messages.
Yeah, something like that, which really captures how different it is from, say, arguments behind closed doors. Online, word spread instantly, seen by millions simultaneously.
Makes the whole thing feel much more immediate and maybe even escalates it faster. A modern way to have a public disagreement, as the source puts it.
Definitely. It showed how these high-level fights can now play out in real time on these massive public platforms.
Okay, so we've gone from friendship to public fights, threats, business impacts, the online battle. Where does the source leave things? Does it just end there?
Not quite. It introduces one final, maybe slightly surprising element towards the end. A new idea came up, it says.
The new idea? Like what?
Amidst all the fighting, the source describes another businessman, a very rich one, stepping in, sort of.
What did this other businessman do?
He spoke out publicly about the situation and basically suggested that Trump and Musk should try to find a peaceful way forward. Stop arguing and make peace.
An appeal for calm from a third party. And how did that land, according to the source? Did Musk react?
He did. The source says Musk saw the suggestion and actually answered publicly.
And what did he say?
He apparently said the businessman who suggested peace was right.
Interesting. How does the source interpret that response?
It suggests that this showed that maybe Elon Musk was open to the idea of stopping the disagreement. Like, maybe he thought making peace could be a good step after everything.
A potential opening. A glimmer of hope, maybe?
Potentially. But the source immediately adds a big note of caution.
Okay, what's the catch?
Just because Musk seemed open to it did not mean the fight was over. Crucially, it was still unclear if President Trump felt the same way.
Right. Takes two to tango, as they say.
Exactly. And the source points out that finding peace might be difficult after such a big public fight. After all the policy disagreements, the harsh words, the business threats, it's hard to just walk that back.
So the possibility was floated, but it wasn't a sure thing at all.
That's how the source leaves it. The idea of peace was there, but it was not certain. Still very much up in the air.
So wrapping up this deep dive based on the material we looked at, it's really traced quite a journey. started with that surprising friendship, then moved into a very public argument, escalated with strong words and big threats. We saw real business impacts. The whole thing played out online.
And ended with this suggestion for peace that the source itself says was pretty uncertain.
Yeah. What do you think is the main takeaway from this source material? What does it really show us?
I think it's a really vivid look at what happens when big leaders have problems with each other in front of everyone. It shows how these dynamics at the top aren't just personal spats.
Right.
They can have real and significant effects on business value, on government programs, on how the public perceives these powerful figures and institutions.
It definitely makes you think about how these high-profile disagreements play out today, especially with social media amplifying everything, and the questions the source raises about, that line between big business and government power.
Yeah, and how messy it can get when personalities clash so publicly.
So a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on, based only on what we've discussed from the source material.
Given how quickly this relationship shifted, according to the transcript, from apparent close collaboration to open hostility and serious threats involving billions of dollars in national programs, what does this specific story suggest to you about the nature of power itself? How stable are these high-level relationships, really? And what's the true impact of communication, especially public digital communication, when the stakes are this incredibly high?